I've got an agenda up here to talk a little bit about what the students speak, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the privatization of our education. We'll have a discussion after that, and then we will probably break out into groups, and then hopefully we'll come back to and have a recap after that. Amy's going to start off with a little bit about what the students speak is.
Hi everybody, actually, real quick, this is kind of on a side note, I'm just going to pass around this petition here. This is to save Troy Davis. He's a man in Georgia on death row. He's sentenced to be executed in about a week on the 21st. And there's overwhelming evidence of his innocence. I'll let you read a little more in the papers below here. But, please feel free to sign us, help us out. We're not only trying to save Troy's life, but we're also really trying to take a critical look at the death penalty and what it means in the society and the things that it stands for and the huge, huge contradictions that exist within it that sustain it under capitalism and the way it targets people of color and poor people especially. So please take a look. Anyways, the students speak. Welcome everybody. Thank you for coming. We're trying to get started this year and see what is realistic for us to do and what is the best strategy for us to organize and to see what everybody wants to do this semester in relation to the budget cuts on campus. I'm just going to give you a little recap on what happened previously and last semester. The Student Speak is a student organization that is not a registered student organization. So we don't actually function under the bureaucracy of the university. We don't have to abide by their rules. We're not subject to their policing, that type of thing. We organize the way we want to, and we organize democratically this is basically a space for students to have a voice that's outside of the way that the university wants us to have a voice, hopefully that makes sense. Anyhow, so previously, last semester, we saw some really devastating cuts to ethnic studies and women's and gender studies. Initially, they proposed up to 40% cuts to Mexican American studies, Latin American studies, African American studies, and related people studies. And what ended up happening, actually, what they gave us a huge runaround and actually let us know about the cuts at really inconvenient times. That was clearly quite calculated in the way that they do it. They understand that we're college students. They understand the schedules that we function on. They understand when it's best for them to release information that might aggravate us, because there are certain breaks where a lot of people go home and disperse and people graduate, and they depend on that time schedule actually for us to limit the ways that we can organize against the things that they're doing. And that's something that we all need to be mindful of with this type of organizing, that they also are kind of organized in the way that they're distributing cuts and that type of thing. And so I just want to let you know kind of what happened last semester. After the proposed cuts, the actual cuts that happened were 100% cuts to the Vietnamese language program, the Center for East Asian Studies, the Humanities Institute, and the Center for Russian, East European, and Eurasian Studies. And then there were 30% budget cuts to the Center for Middle Eastern Studies, and 25% cuts to Asian American Studies, and Women's and Gender Studies, and to LILA, the Long Institute of Latin American Studies. On top of that, there were 20% cuts to the South Asia Institute, and 12% cuts to the Center for African American Studies and Mexican American Studies. And also really interesting factoid was that they actually initially proposed to give a 10% increase in funds to the Center for European Studies, which really highlighted the kind of racist attitude that they had towards the cuts, and the very clear ways that they were distributing these cuts really, really disproportionately to people of color, to people's studies that have historically been marginalized. So they proposed this 10% increase to European studies, and after student backlash to that, they actually ended up cutting that 10% because they realized that that's not something that they were going to be able to get away with. Before those final cuts were made, it's important to note that it's important to know that they are organized in the way that they're doing things, and they have a system, and they have a very strategic way of getting cuts taken care of. The way it happened last year was we organized, and what ended up happening was that it was a very clear divide and conquer tactic that happened. Basically, African American studies and Latin American studies, or Mexican American studies, ended up organizing on their own and actually being really, really militant and calling up every single alumni for the past like decade, and getting a huge assembly called where the president basically had to meet the wrath of all these alumni that contribute significant amounts of money to the university. And so after that, before they were proposed to be cut up to 40%, and after that happened, their cuts were reduced down to 12 and redistributed quite efficiently to Asian American Studies and Women's and Gender Studies, where their cuts actually were increased from the initial proposal, where Asian American Studies was initially 10%, 10.8%, and then increased after a square root induction was proposed. Then it was 21.6%, and then it was finally increased to 25%. So we kind of saw the redistribution of cuts go that way. It was this very clear divide and conquer tactic that was able to happen because of a lack of solidarity within the ethnic studies community, which was really, really unfortunate because we had been organizing together for quite a long time, but at the final, at the end of it, that is kind of what happened, unfortunately. So we do really hope to avoid that this semester, and from this, take that as a lesson from here on out to really come together on this and not just preserve one area of studies, but preserve them all, because these cuts are really, really devastating. I mean, it's no secret that historically, minority studies and people studies have been marginalized. I'm sure we all know that history has taken a very specific, biased route of a Eurocentric version of it and completely neglected minority studies and people studies and anything regarding the side of people of color and women's and gender studies, especially queer people and that type of thing. It's certainly no secret, and these cuts kind of act in a way that the administration is able to say that ethnic studies is unimportant without actually saying that it's unimportant. They're actually able to establish that it's unimportant by making these disproportionate cuts, while but they don't actually have to say it, because they can just make the cuts and call it a budgetary measure and not actually have to have a real discussion about the very real implications of it. So that's kind of what we saw last year. I don't know if Tatiana wants to say anything extra, or Karina, but that's kind of what we saw happen last year, and it's, and we heard this really specific rhetoric come from Powers. He would say things like, what was it? He was talking about an era of innovation and how innovation requires that we manage costs, when really managing costs requires innovation, and that's really kind of what we're looking at here is like, of course they are getting these cuts handed down from the legislature, which we also have to fight, no doubt, but it's not that innovation requires that we manage costs, it's that we have to manage costs, so we're going to have to be innovative. You're going to have to share TAs now. I actually have a TA that is splitting her time in one class with another class. And so TAs, professors, they're getting like boatloads more work than usual and having to manage it. And classes are increasing in size. You're getting these huge auditorium-sized classes instead of small, intimate classrooms where you actually get some real one-on-one contact with the professor and get to have that individual growth. And that's just one of many implications. There are actually much fewer TAs available to begin with, and graduate seats available to begin with in a lot of these area studies. And so, sorry, that's where we're at now.
I'd like to add,
yeah, please.
Also that the budget cuts really are unnecessary.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That's really critical for people to understand, that they're really unnecessary budget cuts. And the money is there. You keep hearing the bottom line from the administration that there's the money. The money is there. You have to fight for it. You have to struggle for it. And they're not just going to give it to you. But you have to fight for it.
That's a point that should absolutely be driven home, but we're not fighting a pointless battle. This is a discourse and a narrative that they're putting out there that most people accept. They're like, oh, it's hard times, the economy, blah, blah, but the money is there. There's several actual sources of money that are not being tapped into, and different ways of redistributing funds that aren't happening. We built an $11 million building that who asked for, and the SBM contract. I mean, there's lots of money in this institution. Let's not joke here. It's $1 billion business here, and Luciano's going to talk more about the privatization of the institution, but basically, I just wanted to talk about that. I think I covered most of it, but so part of the rhetoric that's coming out from the tower is that, you know, they want to offer the highest quality undergraduate education, graduate programs, and research to prepare the next generation of leaders who will change the world. And this is a really romantic vision that is in stark contradiction to what we actually face as students, leaving here with, you know, how much debt. I'm sure plenty of us have taken out student loans as it is, and more to come, I'm sure. But we have a fight ahead of us, and hopefully we're all in the mood.